The Galactic Concord had kept peace among the stars for 12,000 years. 847 species lived under its protection, trading goods, sharing knowledge, and settling their disputes through words instead of weapons. Wars still happened sometimes, but they were small and controlled. The Concord made sure of that. Humanity had joined this great alliance barely 3 centuries ago. They were young by galactic standards. Most species had traveled between stars for tens of thousands of years before humans even discovered fire. The elder races looked at humanity the way adults look at children, with patience, sometimes with amusement, and often with gentle dismissal. Humans occupied 17 worlds on the outer rim of the galaxy. They built beautiful cities and created strange music that made other species feel emotions they could not name. They painted pictures of sunsets and wrote poems about love and loss. They laughed easily and cried openly. Many species found them fascinating. Others found them weak. The Vethkai Dominion had once ruled through fear and blood. They were predator-stole, scaled creatures with 4 arms and eyes that glowed like dying stars. 10,000 years ago, they had conquered and enslaved dozens of species until the Concord finally crushed their empire and forced them into submission. For millennia, they had waited in silence, nursing their hatred and rebuilding their strength in the shadows. Now a new overlord had risen among them. Kethris the Reclaimer believed the time had come to restore the Dominion's glory. His spies had studied every species in the Concord, looking for the perfect first target. They needed a species that was isolated from the core worlds, one that had few allies, one that would fall quickly and send a message to the galaxy. They chose humanity. Kethris gathered his war council in the great hall of their hidden fortress. Holographic displays showed human worlds, green and blue planets, full of soft creatures who spent their time making art and building gardens. The Overlord's mandibles clicked with anticipation. "They are perfect," he said. "Young, isolated, their military is small. They have no true warships, only exploration vessels with basic defenses. We will crush them in weeks, and the galaxy will remember what the Vethkai once were." His generals agreed eagerly. They had waited so long for this moment. 2,000 warships had been built in secret, hidden in asteroid fields and abandoned systems. Their crews hungered for conquest. But before the order could be given, the air in the chamber grew cold. The lights flickered and died. When they returned, 3 figures stood in the center of the room, beings made of pure light that shifted and flowed like water. They had no faces, no bodies, just shapes that suggested something ancient and vast. Every Vethkai in the room froze. They knew what these creatures were. The Hollow Ones, the Watchers. They were older than the Concord, older than any empire. They observed the galaxy but never interfered. For them to appear now meant something terrible. The largest of the Hollow Ones spoke, and its voice echoed in every mind at once. "Do not wake the humans from their peace. What sleeps in them cannot be put back to sleep." Kethris recovered his courage first. He stepped forward, his forearms spread wide in defiance. "You speak in riddles," he said. "Humans are nothing. They make music and cry at death. They are prey, not predators. We have studied them thoroughly." The Hollow One's light flickered, and for just a moment, Kethris felt something cold touch his mind, images he could not understand. Fire, blood, mushroom clouds, trenches filled with bodies, ships burning in space. And through it all, humans, always humans, fighting, dying, and fighting again with a fury that seemed endless. Then the images were gone, and the Hollow One spoke again. "You have studied what they show the galaxy. You have not seen what they hide from themselves. Turn back. This is our only warning." The 3 figures faded like morning mist, leaving the war council in stunned silence. Then Kethris laughed. It was a harsh clicking sound that echoed through the hall. "Ghosts and riddles," he said. "The Hollow Ones have watched too long and understood too little. Humans weep at their funerals. They write songs about peace. They are soft, and soft things break." His generals laughed with him, and the fear faded from the room. Within the hour, the invasion order was given. 2,000 warships began moving toward human space. The colony world of New Geneva was the first target. It was a paradise planet rolling green hills, crystal-clear lakes, and cities that blended perfectly with nature. 4 million humans lived there, including many families who had chosen it specifically because it was far from any danger. The Vethkai fleet arrived without warning. They had disassembled the communication satellites first, cutting the planet off from any call for help. Then the bombardment began. The humans of New Geneva had no warships to defend them. They had a small security force meant to handle criminals, not invasions. They had shelters built for natural disasters, not orbital strikes. They never had a chance. The Vethkai did not simply conquer, they made a statement. Their troops landed in the cities and hunted civilians through the streets. They broadcast the screams across their fleet's communication network, laughing and cheering at the terror they caused. They took trophies from the dead fingers' ears, teeth. They recorded everything, planning to send the footage to other human worlds as a message of what was coming by the time the sun set on New Geneva. 4 million humans were dead. Men, women, children, elderly. The Vethkai made no distinction. The beautiful cities burned. The crystal lakes turned red. The green hills were scarred with craters and mass graves. Priest watched the final reports from his flagship with deep satisfaction. The operation had been perfect. Not a single HFY warship lost. The humans had died crying and begging, just as he had predicted. They would pray, nothing more. He ordered his fleet to prepare for the next target. There were 16 more human worlds to cleanse, and he wanted them all burning within the month. But far across the galaxy, something was changing. The news of New Geneva spread through human space at the speed of light. On every world, humans stopped what they were doing. They watched the footage that the HFY had been foolish enough to broadcast. They saw their people hunted like animals. They saw children running from laughing monsters. They saw everything. And deep within them, something ancient began to wake. Something they had spent centuries trying to forget. Something that had built empires and destroyed them. That had split atoms and nearly ended their own world. That had fought through ice ages and plagues and wars without number. The HFY had made a mistake that would cost them everything. They had looked at human kindness and seen weakness. They had looked at human tears and seen prey. They had not understood that humans chose to be gentle, that their peace was not submission but discipline, that every song about love was written by a species that also knew how to hate with a fury that could burn worlds. The Hollow Ones had tried to warn them. Now it was too late. On Earth, in a bunker built during humanity's darkest century, ancient systems began powering up for the first time in 200 years. Generals who had lived in quiet retirement received calls summoning them to emergency councils. Ships that the galaxy thought were simple exploration vessels revealed hidden weapon systems that had never been removed. Only waiting. Humanity had shown the galaxy its best self for 300 years. Now the HFY would meet everything else. 3 days after New Geneva burned, the galaxy waited to see how humanity would respond. Every species expected the same thing. The young, soft humans would run to the Concord begging for protection. They would cry and plead for intervention. They would hide behind the elder races like frightened children, seeking safety from a bully. That was not what happened. Instead, humanity went silent. Every human vessel across the galaxy turned around and headed home. Ambassadors packed their belongings and left their posts without explanation. Trade ships abandoned their routes, mid-journey. Communication channels that had been filled with human voices, their music, their news, their endless chatter went completely dark. Within 48 hours, there was not a single human voice speaking to the rest of the galaxy. In the great halls of the Galactic Concord, elder species who had watched humanity for centuries began to grow uneasy. The silence was wrong. Prey animals ran and screamed when predators attacked. They did not simply stop. They did not go quiet and still, like deep water before a storm. Ambassador Velthrix of the consortium had lived among humans for 60 years. When news of the silence reached the Concord chambers, he immediately requested an emergency session. The other ambassadors listened with mild curiosity as the elderly being took the speaking platform. "You must understand what you are witnessing," Velthrix said, his voice trembling. "I have studied humans my entire life. This silence is not fear. This is not surrender. This is preparation." Laughter rippled through the chamber. The HFY representative, a junior diplomat who had been left behind while the warriors went to claim glory, clicked his mandibles in amusement. "Preparation for what?" he asked. "They have 17 worlds and a handful of patrol ships. The Dominion has already destroyed one colony and will soon destroy the rest. The humans are simply accepting their fate." Velthrix turned to face the HFY, and for the first time in 60 years, his kind eyes showed something like anger. "I watched humans during what they call the Unification Wars," he said quietly. 2 centuries ago, before they ever reached the stars, they nearly destroyed themselves. They built weapons that could crack continents. They created poisons that could kill planets. They fought with a brutality that made the HFY conquests look like children's games. The chamber grew quiet. No one had ever heard Velthrix speak this way. And then they stopped. The old ambassador continued. "They looked at what they had become, and they chose to be different. They built the United Human Governance. They destroyed their worst weapons. They made art instead of war. They reached for the stars with open hands instead of closed fists." He paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of species who had dismissed humanity as harmless. But they did not forget how to be what they were. They simply chose not to be. Every day, with every song and every poem and every act of kindness, they make that choice again. And you fool HFY, you just gave them a reason to choose differently. The HFY representative started to respond, but he was interrupted by a sudden alert. Every screen in the chamber lit up with the same image, a human woman in a simple gray uniform, standing before a plain background. She looked tired. Her eyes were red from crying, but her voice was steady as stone. "This message is addressed to the Galactic Concord and all its member species," she said. 3 days ago, the HFY Dominion murdered 4 million of our people on New Geneva. They killed our children. They hunted our elderly. They broadcast their screams as entertainment." She paused, and something in her expression shifted. The grief was still there, but now it was wrapped in something harder, something colder. "We offered the galaxy everything good in us. Our music, our art, our kindness, our open hands," the HFY answered with the blood of innocence. The woman straightened, and her voice dropped to barely more than a whisper. So be it. We will show you everything else we are. The screen went dark. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. The Vethkai representative tried to dismiss the message as empty threats, but no one was listening to him anymore. Everyone was watching the old ambassador, who had sunk into his seat with his head in his hands. What does it mean? Someone asked. What else are they? Velthrix looked up with ancient tired eyes. Pray you never find out, he said. On Earth, deep beneath a mountain that had no official name, the Council of 12 gathered for the first time since the Unification Wars. These were not politicians or diplomats. These were the keepers of humanity's darkest secrets, of generals and strategists who had been trained to fight wars that would never end until one side was completely destroyed. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood before them, her white hair pulled back severely, her face lined with years of carefully maintained peace. She had been 20 years old during the last Great War. She remembered the fire and the death. She had spent her entire life making sure it would never happen again. Now she stood before the council with a folder containing 4 million names, every soul lost on New Geneva, every child never coming home. The Concord has offered to mediate, she said flatly. They suggest a negotiated settlement, reparations, a formal apology from the Vethkai. The council members said nothing. They simply looked at her, waiting. The Vethkai have made a formal statement calling New Geneva a lesson for humanity, Elena continued. They promise the same fate for all our worlds, unless we surrender unconditionally and become a subject species of their new empire. Still nothing. The council knew there was only one real question. I have called for a vote, Elena said. The question of mercy. She pressed a button, and 17 lights appeared on the display, one for each remaining human world. One by one, they turned red. Earth, Mars, New Tokyo, Artemis Station, every colony, every outpost, every ship with the right to vote. All red. The vote is unanimous, Elena announced. No mercy. She turned to face a massive screen behind her. It showed a diagram of the Vethkai Dominion, their territory, their fleet positions, their supply lines, their homeworld, everything human intelligence had gathered over decades of quiet observation. Wake them up, she ordered. Deep and secure bunkers across human space. Ancient artificial intelligence's minds built during the darkest century. Designed for total war and then locked away as too dangerous for peace. They began receiving power for the first time in 200 years. Ships that had been parked in orbital graveyards revealed hidden compartments, containing weapons that had been officially decommissioned but never actually destroyed. Factories that had been building construction equipment received new orders and began retooling for a very different purpose. Humanity had spent 3 centuries showing the galaxy a gentle face. Now the mask was coming off, and behind it was something the Vethkai could never have imagined. Admiral Vasquez looked at the display showing the positions of every Vethkai ship, every base, every asset they had revealed through their arrogant assault. They wanted to make an example of us, she said quietly. They wanted to show the galaxy that prey should know its place. They wanted to teach us fear. She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. We will teach them instead. The human counterattack began not with fleets and fire, but with silence and shadows. Vethkai patrol ships started disappearing. One at first, then 3 more, then entire squadrons. They would make their routine check-in, report nothing unusual, and then simply vanish. No distress signals, no debris, no explanation, just empty space where warships used to be. Commander Rethanos of the Vethkai Forward Fleet tried to stay calm as another report came in. 12 more ships gone. That made 47 in the past week. His superiors demanded answers, but he had none to give. It was as if the void itself was swallowing their vessels whole. Then the messages started. Arriving the first came from a ship that had been missing for 3 days. Every screen on Rethanos' S-Bridge suddenly displayed the same image. A dark room, empty except for a single chair. A human sat in that chair, perfectly still, staring directly at the camera. He said nothing. He did not need to. The message was clear enough. We see you. The transmission repeated on every channel, every frequency, every device capable of receiving a signal. Rethanos ordered his communications officers to block it, but they could not. The humans had somehow bypassed every security protocol the Vethkai possessed. For 6 hours, the message played, then it stopped, and in its place came another transmission, a recording from one of the missing patrol ships. The footage showed Vethkai soldiers going about their routine, confident and unaware. Then, one by one, they began to fall. No visible attackers, no alarms, just bodies dropping silently to the floor. The last image was a human face appearing from the shadows, reaching toward the camera, and then darkness. Rethanos ordered his fleet to high alert. Every ship locked down, every soldier armed, every sensor pushed to maximum range. They would not be taken by surprise. It did not matter. Vethkai soldiers on occupied human worlds began dying in their sleep. They would lie down in their bunks, perfectly healthy, and simply never wake up. Medical officers found no wounds, no poison, no trace of any weapon. The humans on these worlds, the few who had survived the initial invasion, watched with empty, patient eyes and said nothing. Fear spread through the Vethkai occupation forces. Soldiers started refusing to sleep. Officers demanded constant guard rotation. Some units abandoned their posts entirely and fled back to the fleet. Discipline, the foundation of Vethkai military might, began to crack. Then, finally, the human fleet revealed itself. Rethanos was aboard his flagship when the long-range sensors lit up with contacts, hundreds of them, no thousands, ships of every size, from small attack craft to massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything the Vethkai had built. They emerged from concealed positions throughout the system, surrounding the Vethkai fleet in perfect formation. But these were not the ships Rethanos had studied. Human vessels were supposed to be elegant, gentle things, curved lines and bright colors and diplomatic suites instead of weapon bays. These ships were something else entirely. Angular, dark, bristling with weapons that looked like they had been designed with only one purpose in mind. Admiral Elena Vasquez appeared on his screen, her face cold and expressionless. "You are surrounded," she said simply. "Your weapons will not save you. Your reinforcements will not reach you. You have one chance to surrender and face trial for the crimes committed on New Geneva." Rethanos gathered his courage. The Vethkai were warriors. They did not surrender to prey. "We will destroy you," he snarled. "You are soft. You make music and cry at funerals. You are not soldiers." Elena tilted her head slightly, and something like pity flickered in her eyes. "We were building weapons when your species was still learning to stand upright," she said quietly. "We were fighting world wars while you were painting on cave walls. We split the atom and burned cities to ash when your ancestors thought the stars were gods." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "We chose to become something better. You reminded us of what we were before. And now, Commander, you will learn why the Hollow Ones warned you." The Battle of Thiessen Corridor lasted 11 minutes. 300 Vethkai warships opened fire with everything they had. Energy weapons, missiles, kinetic projectiles. The void lit up with destruction aimed at the human fleet. It hit nothing. Human ships moved through the barrage like ghosts, their movements impossible to predict. They were faster than anything that Psi should be able to move. Their shields absorbed hits that should have destroyed them. And when they fired back, their weapons carved through Vethkai armor like it was made of paper. Rethanos watched in horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled. Ships he had served on for decades exploded around him. Crews he had trained screamed for help that would never come. The humans did not miss. They did not hesitate. Every shot was precise, devastating, final. When it was over, 300 Vethkai warships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris. Human losses 0. Rethanos managed to escape with a handful of damaged vessels. He fled toward Concord space, broadcasting distress signals to anyone who would listen. The Galactic Concord, horrified by the scale of the destruction, demanded an immediate ceasefire. Their diplomatic channels filled with urgent messages to humanity, pleading for peace talks. The human response was a single transmission, broadcast to every species in the galaxy. It contained footage from New Genevan edited recordings captured by Vethkai troops themselves. The galaxy watched Vethkai soldiers chase screaming children through burning streets. They watched elderly humans executed for sport. They watched soldiers laughing as they collected trophies from the dead. Then Admiral Vasquez appeared on screen, her voice carrying a weight that made ancient species tremble. "You asked us to be peaceful," she said. You asked us to be kind. For 300 years, we offered the galaxy the best of what humanity could be. We shared our music, our art, our dreams of a better universe." She held up a small objected child's toy, burned and blackened, recovered from New Geneva. This belonged to a little girl named Maria. She was 6 years old. She liked to dance and wanted to be a doctor when she grew up. A Vethkai soldier crushed her skull for entertainment and kept her fingers as souvenirs. The Admiral's composure cracked for just a moment. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes grew wet. Then the steel returned. "We will be peaceful again," she said. "We will be kind again. But first, we will be what you forced us to become. And when we are finished, the galaxy will understand something very important." She looked directly at the camera, directly at every being watching across 1,000 worlds. "Never touch our children again." The transmission ended. Across Vethkai space, sensors began detecting the approach of the main human fleet. Not hundreds of ships, not thousands, tens of thousands. Every vessel humanity had built in 3 centuries of expansion. Every secret shipyard's entire output. Every retired warship pulled from museum orbits and armed for one final mission. The largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history, carrying the collective fury of a species that had finally stopped holding back. The Vethkai homeworld received word of their approach. Overlord Kethris, who had laughed at the Hollow One's warning, sat alone in his throne room and finally began to understand the magnitude of his mistake. Humans did not simply fight wars, they ended them. The Vethkai homeworld of Kethva had stood unconquered for 15,000 years. Even during the Great War with the Galactic Concord, enemy forces had never reached its surface. The planet was surrounded by orbital fortresses, defense platforms, and the largest concentration of warships in Vethkai history. Overlord Kethris had recalled every vessel from across the Dominion for this final stand. 8,000 warships, millions of soldiers, enough firepower to crack a moon. It would not be enough. The human fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, and the Vethkai sensors screamed warnings that their operators refused to believe. 32,000 human vessels arranged in perfect formation, blocking every possible escape route. Behind them, more ships continued to arrive, supply vessels, medical ships, troop transports. Humanity had not come for a battle. They had come for an ending. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of her flagship, the UHS Remembrance. Every screen showed data about enemy positions, fleet movements, tactical projections. Her officers waited for orders, their faces grim but determined. Every one of them had lost someone on New Geneva. Every one of them had watched the footage of children being hunted. "Open a channel to the Vethkai fleet," Elena ordered. The communications officer hesitated. "Admiral, they've refused all previous hails. They'll take this one." The channel opened, and Elena's image appeared on every Vethkai bridge in the system. Overlord Kethris himself stared at her from his throne room, his forearms gripping the armrests with barely controlled rage. "You have entered Vethkai space without authorization," he snarled. "This is an act of war against a sovereign power. The Galactic Concord has formally condemned your unprovoked attack on New Geneva." Elena interrupted calmly. "They have declared the Vethkai Dominion to be in violation of 17 treaties. They have withdrawn all diplomatic protection from your species." Kethris' mandibles clicked nervously. He had not known that. "Furthermore," Elena continued, "we are not here to negotiate. We are not here to discuss terms. We are here to ensure that what happened on New Geneva can never happen again. Then we will destroy you." Kethris roared. 8,000 warships against your fleet. "We are warriors. We have conquered dozens of species. You are nothing but prey." Elena's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "Soft creatures who make music and cry at funerals. Yes, you said that before. Your people said many things as they murdered our children. They laughed. They celebrated. They kept pieces of our debt as trophies." She leaned forward, and her eyes held something that made even the Overlord's blood run cold. "We heard every word. We saved every recording. And now, Overlord Kethris, we are going to play them back for you." The human fleet began broadcasting. Every ship, every channel, every frequency carried the same transmissions, the intercepted communications from New Geneva. Vethkai soldiers laughing as they chased civilians, officers congratulating each other on kill counts, the screams of the dying broadcasters entertainment. The Vethkai warriors heard their own voices celebrating atrocities. They heard themselves joking about the soft prey even as that prey's children begged for mercy. The transmissions played on an endless loop, impossible to block, impossible to escape. "This is why we are here," Elena said. "Not for conquest, not for territory, not for vengeance. We are here so that no species in this galaxy ever forgets what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness." The Battle of Kethva began that lasted 3 days. Not because humanity needed that long, but because they chose to make it last. Every Vethkai ship that tried to flee found human vessels already waiting at the jump points. Every attempt to send a distress signal was jammed. Every formation the Vethkai attempted was anticipated and countered before it could fully deploy. The human fleet did not simply defeat the enemy. They dismantled them systematically, thoroughly, with a precision that spoke of centuries of practice in the art of total war. On the second day, some Vethkai captains tried to surrender. Their signals were acknowledged but not accepted. Human ships continued firing with mechanical precision, targeting weapons and engines first, then life support, then everything else. When escape pods launched, they were tracked in and their occupants taken prisoner. But the ships themselves were not spared. "Why?" A captured Vethkai officer screamed at his human guards. "We surrendered. Your laws say you must accept surrender." The human guard looked at him with eyes that held no hatred, only exhaustion. "Your people didn't accept surrender on New Geneva," she said. "Women begged for their children's lives. Old men offered themselves in exchange for their grandchildren. None of it mattered. You killed them anyway." She turned away. "We're still better than you were. Your prisoners will be fed and treated fairly. But your fleet dies. Every ship, every weapon, so that nothing like New Geneva can ever happen again." By the third day, the space around Kethva was filled with debris. 8,000 warships reduced to expanding clouds of metal and frozen atmosphere. The greatest military force the Vethkai had ever assembled, destroyed so completely that it would take them centuries to rebuild. Overlord Kethris sat alone in his throne room as reports came in. He had watched his empire's entire strength evaporate in 72 hours. His generals were dead or captured. His fleet was gone. Human troop transports were now descending through the atmosphere. Toward every military installation on the planet, a communication request appeared on his screen. "Admiral Vasquez, I wish to negotiate terms of surrender," Kethris said, his voice hollow. Elena shook her head slowly. "There are no terms," she replied. "There is no negotiation. You started this by murdering 4 million of our people for the crime of existing. You broadcast their deaths as entertainment. You laughed while children screamed. I will give you anything, Kethris said. Anything you want. Resources, territory, slaves from our conquered worlds. I will personally execute every soldier who participated in. You don't understand, Alina interrupted. We don't want anything from you. We're not here to take. We're here to remove every weapon your species possesses, every ship capable of reaching space, every piece of technology that could ever threaten our children again. You would reduce us to primitives. You reduced 4 million of our people to corpses. Be grateful we're leaving you alive. The transmission ended. Through the windows of his throne room, Kethris could see human dropships descending through the clouds like seeds of his empire's destruction. The Hollow Ones had tried to warn him. He had not listened. He had looked at human kindness and seen weakness. He had looked at human art and seen softness. He had not understood that everything he saw was a choice cage that humanity built for itself to contain what they truly were. Now the cage was open, and Kethris finally understood that the prey he had mocked could transform into something far more terrifying than any predator. The ground forces landed. There was almost no resistance. 6 months after the Battle of Kethva, the Galactic Concord held an emergency session. Every species sent their highest representatives. Even the Hollow Ones appeared, their forms of light hovering silently at the edge of the chamber. No one had seen them attend a Concord meeting in 3,000 years. The topic was humanity. Ambassador after ambassador rose to speak, and the same themes echoed through every speech. Fear, confusion, a desperate need to understand what they had witnessed. The Vethkai Dominion no longer existed. Not conquered in the traditional sense, humanity had claimed no territory, established no occupation, government, demanded no tribute. Instead, they had simply erased every trace of Vethkai military power from existence. Every warship destroyed, every weapons factory dismantled, every military academy closed, every piece of technology capable of spaceflight removed. The Vethkai people themselves survived, scattered across Concord space as refugees, dependent on the charity of species they had once terrorized. Their homeworld remained, but it had been reduced to a pre-industrial state. It would take them centuries to reach the stars again. Humanity had done all this without committing a single atrocity. Captured soldiers were fed and housed and eventually released. Civilians were evacuated before military targets were destroyed. Medical care was provided to the wounded, even enemy wounded. The contrast with New Geneva could not have been more stark. That was what frightened the galaxy most. The clinical precision of it. The cold efficiency of a species that had turned itself into a perfect weapon and then, just as deliberately, turned itself back. The human representative was the last to speak. Her name was Sarah Chen, and she had lost a daughter on New Geneva, a little girl named Maria who had liked to dance and wanted to be a doctor. Sarah carried a small photograph in her pocket, but she did not show it to the assembly. She stood before the gathered representatives of 800 species and waited for silence. "You are afraid of us," she said simply. "I can see it in how you look at me, in how you step back when humans enter a room, in how your children whisper about monsters from the outer rim." No one denied it. "Good," Sarah continued. "Be afraid, but understand why." She touched a control and holographic images appeared. Human history laid bare. Wars that had killed millions. Weapons that could destroy cities in a single flash. Concentration camps and genocides and horrors that made the Vethkai look like amateurs. "This is what we were," Sarah said. "For most of our existence, we were exactly what the Vethkai thought we were. The most efficient killers our planet ever produced. We fought and murdered and conquered until we nearly destroyed ourselves completely." The images changed. Now they showed something different. Artists creating beauty, scientists curing diseases, humans reaching out to help each other after disasters, children playing in parks, families sharing meals. "And this is what we chose to become," Sarah said. "Not because we forgot what we were, not because we became weak, but because we looked at ourselves and decided we wanted to be better. Every day, we make that choice again. Every song we write, every child we raise, every stranger we help, these are all decisions to be something other than what evolution made us." She turned to face the entire assembly. "The Vethkai made a mistake that we hope no one will ever repeat. They looked at our choice to be kind and thought it meant we had no other option. They attacked our children and assumed we would simply accept it." Sarah's voice hardened. "We will not. We chose peace, but we did not forget war. We chose mercy, but we remember how to be merciless. And if anyone ever forces us to open that door again, they will discover what the Vethkai learned. There is no fury in the galaxy, like a peaceful species that has been given a reason to fight." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But here is what I want you to understand, what I hope the Vethkai's fate will teach the galaxy for generations to come. We take no pleasure in what we did. We wanted to share our music and our art and our dreams with the universe. We wanted to learn from you and teach you and build something beautiful together." Her voice cracked slightly, and for a moment, the fierce ambassador became simply a mother who had buried her child. "My daughter Maria would have been 7 years old next month. She drew pictures of alien species and dreamed of meeting them someday. She believed the universe was full of wonders waiting to be discovered." Sarah took a breath and steadied herself. "I want to believe she was right. I want to return to being the species that makes music and cries at funerals. I want my granddaughter, if I ever have one, to grow up in a galaxy where humans are known for their kindness, not their capacity for destruction. She looked around the chamber one final time. That is the future we choose. But make no mistake, it is a choice. And if anyone ever takes our children from us again, we will choose differently. The Hollow Ones warned the Vethkai not to wake us from our peace. Now the entire galaxy has seen what happens when that warning is ignored. Sarah gathered her materials and prepared to leave. We ask nothing from you. No apologies, no reparations, no promises. We ask only that you remember. Remember, New Geneva. Remember that the humans who make beautiful things and weep for their dead are the same humans who can break an empire in 3 days. She walked out of the chamber without looking back. 1 year later, a monument was completed on the rebuilt colony of New Geneva. 4 million names carved in white stone, arranged in a spiral that could be seen from orbit. At the center stood a statue of a human child. Not Maria specifically, but a representation of every child lost that day. The figure held one hand up toward the stars, reaching for dreams that would never be fulfilled. At the base of the monument, a simple inscription: they were loved, they were avenged. May no one ever give us reason to remember how humans returned to their art and their music in their peaceful ways. The cage closed again, the violence locked away behind centuries of conscious effort. Ships that had carried weapons were converted back to exploration vessels. Generals returned to their gardens. Ancient war machines were powered down and sealed away once more. But the galaxy remembered. In diplomatic meetings, species gave human representatives extra respect. In trade negotiations, no one tried to cheat human merchants. When human children played in alien cities, no one touched them. And in the great archives of the Hollow Ones, watchers who had observed the universe since before the first stars died updated their records. Next to the entry for humanity, they added a single notation: peaceful by choice, dangerous beyond measure, approach with extreme respect. The warning would stand for 10,000 years, and in all that time, no species would ever again make the mistake of confusing human kindness for weakness. The galaxy had learned.